So this article sets up the idea for the overarching theme in Anthem. Anthem's going to be your next book. The big thing in Anthem is conformity. Everyone's the same, like literally the same. So we're going to read this article to get a better idea of what conformity and group conformity are. I'm going to do your little one-sentence summary comments on the side. Make sure that you have your own copy open so that you can make the comments as well. And then there's some questions at the end. So, the pervasive threat of conformity, peer pressure is here to stay. Today, I'd like to revisit one of the most well-known experiments in social psychology, Solomon Asch's lines study. Let's look once more at his striking findings on the power of group conformity and consider what they mean now, more than 50 years later, in a world that is much changed from Asch's 1950s America. How long are these lines? I don't know, you tell me. In the 1950s, Solomon Asch conducted a series of studies to examine the effects of peer pressure in as clear-cut a setting as possible, visual perception. The idea was to see if, when presented with lines of differing lengths and asked questions about the lines, which was the longest, which corresponded to a reference line of a certain length, participants would answer with the choice that was obviously correct, or would fall sway to the pressure of a group that gave an incorrect response. Here is a sample stimulus from one of these studies. So the study was very simple. People were shown 4 lines, and the question was easy. Which line best matches the example? So obviously the answer is A. Just looking at it, you don't need a ruler. You can tell that A is most closely in length to the example. So the experiment was, first, ask people to write down which line they thought. So it was silent. So of course, everybody got it right because it was silent. You wrote on a piece of paper, turned it in. Okay, the answer's A. Now, we get to the experiment of the peer pressure part. Which line matches the reference line? It seems obvious, no? Now imagine that you were in a group with 6 other people, and they all said that it was in fact line B. Now, you would have no idea that you were the only actual participant, and the group was carefully arranged with confederates who were constructed to give that answer and were seated in such a way that they would answer before you. So, that is the big part of the experiment. So, we'll do a little one-sentence summary. You're in a group with 5 other people who all answer out loud before you that the correct answer is B. You know it's clearly not B, but feel anxious because your answer would go against the group's. And that was the big deal, that because they all went before you and they say it's B, when it's clearly A, but they say it's B. So let's keep reading. You'd think that they, like you, were participants in the study and that they all gave what appeared to you to be a patently wrong answer. Would you call their bluff and say, no, the answer is clearly line A, are you blind? Or would you start to question your own judgment? Maybe it really is line B. Maybe I'm just not seeing things correctly. How could everyone else be wrong and I be the only person who's right? And it's that questioning of yourself that makes you give the wrong answer. So, why would we do that? Well, we don't like to be the lone voice of dissent. We don't like to be the only person that speaks out. While we'd like to imagine that we fall into the second camp, statistically speaking, we are 3 times more likely to be in the first. Over 75% of Asch's subjects, and far more in the actual condition given above, gave the wrong answer, going along with the group opinion. But what was happening? Peer pressure, it seems, won over simple visual perception. The tests weren't hard. In the control groups, hardly anyone ever made a mistake. So the control group means the group that answered silently. They hardly ever made a mistake, which makes sense because they don't feel pressured to fit in. But there was something about being the odd man out that caused intelligent, well-educated subjects to go against their better judgment and then to justify their behavior in very creative ways. So that was after the experiment. Why did you give the wrong answer? Why did you follow the group? So to justify their behavior in very creative ways. So after being told they were the test subject, they gave very creative answers as to why they followed the group, because they didn't want it to seem like they were just following everyone else. Because you don't want to be labeled a follower. Like, yeah, that's what you did, but you don't want people to know that. However, there was an important caveat. If at least one other person in the group said the correct answer, the rate of conformity dropped off steeply. All it took was that single voice of dissension, and lo and behold, the participant was ready to join in. He wouldn't, however, do it alone. So that's important. So now, in a new experiment, sorry, I can't spell experiment, another person in the group is told to give the right answer before you answer. So you feel you have a buddy and feel more comfortable giving the right answer. Because that's the big thing, is you don't want to be alone. You don't want to be shunned. Moving beyond the lines, conformity in the social networking age. The Ash effect has been replicated successfully numerous times in a variety of contexts, and each time peer pressure glows strong. It's not surprising, given that Ash's stimuli were about as straightforward as they get. If I can get you to doubt the length of a line when the answer is staring right at you from the page, imagine how much easier it would be to get you to doubt something more complex, something where the shades of gray are much more believable, and the correct answer is far less straightforward. And in that grayer, more nuanced world of ideas, no longer of simple lines, what would the ramifications of conformity to peer pressure be? On the one hand, one could argue that the effect would go away. There are more opinions, more places to find them, a greater chance that you won't be the lone voice of defection, isolated against a united group, and that you'd therefore stick with what you, in the privacy of your pre-group mind, had already decided. So this is just a very fancy way. Most people believe that when presented with a complex, we'll say controversial issue, they would stick to their gut and speak out. That's what most people believe. However, what about those groups that aren't the anonymous masses of the internet, but rather your actual friends, your peers, those that you share with at an over-increasing rate on Facebook, Twitter, or wherever it is you go to share? Don't their opinions hold more sway? And would you be as likely to speak out if you were to find a unified front on the other side of the issue? With the launch of Google+, the question is even more relevant. Now that you can create circles of users in very specific niches, isn't everyone more unlikely that you would disagree? Think, how powerful is the first person to express an opinion in that setting? And how is that likely to shape the thoughts of the group? And what about the ripple effects? So what that's saying is, research shows that when you are with a group of friends, you are likely to go along with what they say or believe, even if you feel otherwise, because you don't want to be kicked out of the group. And it's also saying that the person who speaks first on an issue holds the most influence over others. Because they were there to say it first. So therefore, everyone's going to go back to them, and they're going to have the strongest argument because people are less likely to speak out against them if they're a strong person. The influence of groups in everyday life. In fact, I don't even have to go online to see it in action. Take the world of academia, school. The ivory tower where you have the most educated minds, those that would be most inured, it would stand to reason, against the pernicious influence of peer pressure. This is a world that is predominantly liberal in the political sense of the word. The conservatives are few and far between, and I know many an individual who would never dare express a view that might betray anything other than an overwhelming liberal bias in the group of peers, especially a student or someone who has yet to get tenure. The motto seems to be, for the most part, get tenured first, express dissension later, if at all. So when people who are think of college professors. So think of college professors. Very smart, very opinionated. Research shows they are more likely to go with the group to protect their job or financial situation. And that makes sense. If you're going to speak out against someone higher up than you, you could lose your job, so you're just probably going to bite your tongue and not express how you feel until your job is more secure. And are they wrong to be quiet? The prominent conservatives like Harvey Mansfield are pilloried on a regular basis, their words taken out of context and distorted, made to seem callous and villainous, except Mansfield, of course, has tenure at Harvard. He doesn't care, but he didn't care far, far earlier, and I love him for it. I'll go a step further. I've often been on the side of the political argument. I don't identify with either party and take the issues as they come, and not once have I dared object to senior faculty when I have felt they were saying something ridiculous, stupid, or even potentially dangerous, coming as it was from someone with such widespread influence and authority. Not a single time did I dare argue. No one else did, and there was too much at stake. There are those lone souls, whom I admire to no end, who are different, who will be the sole voice of opposition no matter the costs. I'd like to think I'd be one of them if something mattered enough, but it's tough, and I don't see it ever getting any easier. So in conclusion, people stick with the group because the group is safe and they don't want to be shunned and alone, is what it comes down to. So you have 4 questions here. One is to summarize Ash's experiment, the lines experiment. That's it. Summarize what that was all about. And then in general, what are the dangers of conforming? So what are the dangers of going along with the group? Apply the idea of having the correct answer to your own daily life. Think about school. This is your opinion, so as long as you answer it, you'll get it right. And then 4, another opinion. Think about if you were in Ash's experiment. So if you were one of the 6 people in the room, do you think that you would respond to peer pressure? Think about yourself and then just explain why or why not. And if you have questions, please email me. Make sure you get these comments down. You get points for that.